speaker would be Professor Technologist Dr. Sim Wai. He's currently a professor at Quest International University, APARA, with many years of experience in the higher education industry. Interestingly, his key research interests are in the areas of agent technology, knowledge management, business intelligence, and drone applications. And I've seen some of his work; they are good. Anyway, he earned his bachelor's and PhD from the University of Southampton. Dr. Sim, I won't bore the rest with all your CVs. I'll let you share what you have.
Right, thank you very much, CS, for the introductions. So just to add on for what CS mentioned, I'm actually, my PhD is in the area of machine learning, but at the time we have a different name for it. So that's why AI has been the very centerpiece of all my research works until today. So that aside, a very good afternoon to everyone. I would like to express my gratitude to APARA and Malaysian for inviting me to this talk. So I'm going to talk about the digital workforce and Industrial 4.0. So without further ado, let me share my slides with you all first. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my slides now.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, thank you. So I like what Meng mentioned earlier, but digital workforce should be human-centric rather than process-centric ones. So I'm going to, actually my talk today will encompass the human aspects in the digital workforce, as I'm also, my background is from universities. So my job is actually to prepare the human capitals, right? For our next, preparing our next generations to join the workforce. Right? That's why, that's how I'm going to center my talk around. Is actually on the human side and also on the digital aspects. So I would like to kick off my presentations by first reviewing the industrial revolutions. Actually, it started very early. Right, it started in the late 18th centuries until present days, and it has a very close relationships to our topic today, which is the digital workforce. So it's just like any machine learning algorithms, we need to actually analyze the past data, right, before we can make any inferential deduction. So bear with me while I'm going through the historical data now, right? I'm sure the audience here, you all should be very familiar or no strangers to the words Industrial 4.0 or Industrial Revolution. Manufacturing has actually gone through a few major transformations, which the world had went through or continues to experience today. Right, so I mean, in some countries, they're still in the Industrial 3.0, while others actually embarking to Industrial 4.0. So actually, the first one, right, the first Industrial Revolution happened in 18th century, right? So from the pictures on my slide, you can see that it's during that time, manufacturing evolved from manual labor to machinery powered by steam engines. And then moving on later in 1870, the world entered to the second industrial revolution with the introduction of electricity, which enabled manufacturers to become more efficient. It was during this phase that mass production concepts like the assembly line were introduced as a way to boost productivity. And starting in late 1916s, we have moved into the third industrial revolution, right? Actually, this revolution is actually incorporates electronics and also computer technology into the factories, right? So in these periods, manufacturers that began to experience a shift that put more emphasis on digital technology and automated productions. And now, and for the present days, we are actually going into the fourth industrial revolution, right? So it's actually the fourth industrial revolution is building on top of the third one, right? So it's, the fourth is actually characterized by the fusion of technologies that is blurring the lines between the physicals, digitals, and biological domains. So that is actually the brief histories of what happened, right, in all the industrial revolutions from the first one until the fourth one, where we are actually embarking on. So I'm sure by now you all would have noticed, right, from the slides that I have shown you earlier, that every industrial revolution was driven by a key technology. So these key technologies were termed as general purpose technologies by economists. So sometimes they call it GPT for shorts. So a general purpose technology is an innovative technology that has substantial and pervasive societal and economic effects, right, in a global scale. It actually changing the ways that we live and work. So steam engines, electricities, and ICTs were widely regarded as the three classic general purpose technologies by economists. So let's do a quick recap on the industrial revolutions that we talked about earlier. The first industrial revolution used steam power to mechanize production, okay? And then the second actually used electric power to create mass production. And then the third one used ICTs to automate production, right? So this is actually all the GDPs that is actually leading the revolutions in each of the industrial revolutions. Although all these industrial revolutions had brought one thing in common, it's actually the economic growth, right, in the global scales. But there will all have significant differences in how they affect the creation of new jobs and income growth. Because I think that will be very important, right, to know the difference, because we all like economic growth, right? But at the same time, will this bring new job and income growth? We have to actually further look at the data, right? So the historical data show that in Industrial 1 and 2, right, it actually has transformed the manufacturing process. And in the same time, it has introduced another thing, which we call it the skilling effect, right? So the skilled labors were eliminated, right, and replaced by technologies operated by semi or unskilled labors, right? So this transformation lead to increase of productivity, lowering of production costs, but at the same time, it makes some people very unhappy, which is the victims, right? Who are the skilled laborers, right? They are not very happy because their jobs and their livelihoods were threatened. So what happened, right? There was a major event, right? Actually happened in the first industrial revolution, where the skilled textile workers protested, right, violently, right? They don't just protest on the streets, right, quietly, but they protested violently by destroying textile machinery. So these protesters were called Luddites. Okay, so job loss at the textile industry was actually very significant at the time, right? But it's only happening at the initial stage, because later on, in decades later, new jobs actually emerge, right? As the service sector and office jobs started to open up. Why is it so? Because with the introductions of these textile machines, consumers can afford to buy clothes at a lower price, and this gives them more disposable income, right, to buy other goods. So with technological change in this first industrial revolution, we can see that it's actually an increased demand for new products, which in turn lead to creation of new jobs. Okay, so hence the economists had termed such a phenomenon as Luddite fallacy, right? It was coined for referring to fears that machines would take human jobs away. Okay, so whenever you see this term, it's actually referring to this phenomenon or observations, right? That the machines will actually take the human jobs away. So the believers, right, of this fallacy would think that the fears of technological change is they're actually unfounded, because newer and better jobs will be created in the long term. Okay, so I believe this is a group of people who actually are strong believers in this Luddite fallacy. But can we apply the same Luddite fallacy to the third industrial revolution, right, which is driven by ICT? Well, I would say from my research, the answer is actually no, because the radical transformation brought by the third industrial revolution was favoring skill-biased labors, right, in the production technology. So this led to the widening of income inequality right? Which also translate to inequality in wealth as well. Okay, so there are actually very different cases in the first two industrial revolution, right? Compared in the third one. So the first two is actually they in long terms, they did create new jobs. They did increase the incomes, right, of the peoples. But in this third industrial revolution, is actually a skill bias, right, as opposed to the previous one, which is de-skilling. So that's why they have introduced this we call income inequality. So this was actually observed by two MIT professors, right? Yeah, actually, they observed this is actually going on in the United States, in the US, and they call it the Great Decoupling. Okay, if you look at the charts I have on my slides, so you can see that what is actually happening there, right? So the term Great Decoupling is often referred, right, or often used by the economists to describe the economic decoupling of productivity, wages, jobs, and GDP growth, right? So these are the four key measurements of the health of the economy, right? So if you look at the charts closely on my slide, you can see that actually the labor productivity and GDP growth has decoupled, right? Around in from the median household income, right? Around 1990s, which means GDP is growing, but you will see that the median household income actually has not grown as much, right? In some cases, it's actually declining as well. Okay, so in other words, a growing economy and increase in labor productivity are not longer leading to as many new jobs or as much wage or income growth as in the past. Okay, so this is the observation made by the two professors. And also from 2002 and to the year 2007, the top number 1%, right, in the United States actually reaped 2/3 of all the gains from the growth in the US economy. So which means the inequality of wealth also, the gap is widening as well, right, during this period, 2002 and 2007. And that trends actually continue until today. And similar observations were also made in other developed countries, such as Sweden, Finland, and Germany. Okay, so it is not only unique in the US, but is also observed in other developed countries as well. Okay, so now after we have looked at all the historical data, right, it's time for us now to actually look into our magic crystal ball, right, and predict what will happen in the fourth industrial revolution, right, because in the future, we have to ask the crystal ball now. Okay, so the first and second industrial revolution has disrupted manual labor, right, while the third industrial revolution have impacted on the cognitive side. Okay, I would see that from my research that the industrial 4.0 will disrupt both, right, the manual and the cognitive labor, right, because new technologies such as those mentioned by Ben earlier, right, the robotic process automations introduced will actually automates all these manual and cognitive tasks, right, performed by humans. Okay, so this is how Industrial 4 will impact, right? So the impact is actually a lot in a wider scales, right, compared to the first three industrial revolution. Okay, so with the advancement of AI and robotics, which is the centerpiece of this Industrial Revolution 4 technologies, there's a report saying that there is a likelihood of 50% chances that machines can outperform humans in all tasks, right, in just 45 years, right? Not very far, but may not be in my time, because in 45 years, okay? So this finding was actually reported by researchers from Oxford Universities and Yale Universities in 2017. So they have conducted a research, they have asked all the machine learning experts, and they have come up with these figures. Well, I will not agree 100% with these researchers, because I believe jobs that need creativity and social interactions will still be best, right, handled by humans. And I will also foresee that the great decoupling trend will continue, right? Which means the economic growth and the GDP growth will actually continue to rise, but the income will create a decoupling effect, right, with the growth, which means the income will not increase as much as the growth is going. Okay, so this is what I foresee in the Industrial 4.0 as well. So therefore, we need to prepare ourselves and the next generation towards Industrial 4.0 now. So I will talk more about that later, but let's look at these jobs in the future, right? So how will jobs be affected by Industrial 4.0? Okay, so some jobs will be obsolete, of course, and some jobs will be evolved, and lastly, some new jobs will be created. So this is quite common. It's not the first time we're seeing these trends. It happens in all the Industrial Revolution 1, 2, and 3 as well. Okay, so but in this time of Industrial 4.0, right, jobs that are in danger of being obsolete are actually of routine types, right, and they're usually found in the structured environments. And jobs that may vanish also in the future also include those that can be optimized using data and involve no or minimum social interactions. So this type of jobs will be in the category of obsoletes. So examples will be cashiers, tellers working in the banks, truck drivers, translators, finance and insurance professionals, right? So these are the jobs that may be in the danger, okay, in being obsolete in the future. So jobs that are going to evolve are basically very similar to those in the obsolete category, but with one exception is they have a strong social interaction element. Okay, so those jobs may be routine, those jobs may be in a structured environments, but they require very strong social interaction elements. So examples will be doctors, teachers, tour guides, wedding planners, or maybe receptions. Okay, so take myself as an example, right? I'm a lecturer. I'm lecturing in the universities. So nowadays, we need to know how to use online teaching tools. We need to know how to use multimedia editing tools, right, to make online videos. And also we need to communicate with the students using social media platforms. So we need to evolve ourselves, right? And also with the ease of access to information nowadays, basically it's at your fingertips. The lecturer role now has changed, right? We are changing from a role of being a teacher to being a facilitator, right? So this is what actually happening in my area of works, right? So we are evolving as a lecturers. And last but not least, of course, there will be new jobs created to support the new technologies, right, in the Industrial 4.0, such as maybe AI scientists, IoT engineers, maybe drone pilots, and some job titles that may even not even cross my mind, right, once. Like say, if you asked me the same questions 10 years ago, I wouldn't even be able to think of like e-hailing drivers or food delivery riders, right? That is actually a job in our societies nowadays. Okay, so this is actually what happened in the scenario for the jobs for the futures. Okay, but how badly is it actually Industrial 4.0 in impacting the job market? Okay, so there is a question we would like to ask ourselves. So a report actually published by McKinsey, right, recently, it says that by 2030, well, up to 30 to 40% is actually a very high percentage of all workers in developed countries may need to move into new occupations or at least upgrade their skill sets significantly, right? So this is actually something we should be taking note of because we may be one of the persons in that percentage, right? So what should we do about it? Okay, the answer is actually very simple, right? Not very rocket science. It's actually we need to equip ourselves with the latest digital skills, right? In the areas such as AI, data science, and robotics. And of course, not forgetting that the 4 Cs of the 21st century skills that differentiate us from the machines, which are creativity, critical thinking, communication, and collaboration. So this is the skills that differentiate us from the machines, right? So, which we shouldn't actually ignore them. Okay, I will talk about how the higher learning institutions, which is very close to my heart, right, reacted to such a learning needs later on. But now let's look at how big organizations reacted to such situations. Okay, So you see that Amazon actually had announced in 2019 that it will spend more than 700 million to train 100,000 of their employees, right? For higher skill jobs, right? And it's over the period of about 6 years, okay? 700 million, 6 years to train their employees, okay? So Amazon will pay the employees to attend the company's machine learning universities or learn software development skills, right, through its Amazon Technical Academy. So Jeff Bezos is actually a very clever businessman. He's actually basically moving his money from the left pocket to the right pocket, but at the same time, fulfilling the demands of the job markets, right, for digital workforce. Okay, so he's actually a very successful businessman. And apart from that, we have JP Morgan Chase, right? So they also announced that they have made a 5-year plan and they're going to commit 350 million to develop technical skills in high demand. Okay, so the moves taken by these big companies, Amazon and JP Morgan Chase, are just the latest, right, in a series of efforts by large companies to attract and retain workers in one of the tightest labor markets, right, resulted from the emerging Industrial 4.0. So also, there are various initiatives from the government, such as those shared by the earlier speakers, Mr. Fairuz, some incentive and some projects by the governments, right, by MIMOS, sometimes by NDEX, right, they have a various initiative. So since it has been shared by our speakers early on, so I'm not going to cover it in details. I'm just going to move on and go to our higher learning space, which is actually close to my heart. Okay. So what actually happened in the higher learning space, which is actually my forte. So and how we are reacting to the Industrial 4.0. Okay. So if you look traditionally, universities or higher learning institutions, we design and deliver programs, right, which lead to recognized award, maybe in bachelor, master's, or PhD. Okay, let's take an example for bachelors, right? Typically, these programs, they are designed to provide knowledge and skills over 3 to 4 years of study, okay? So their intention actually is to prepare the graduates to enter the job market, okay? But however, right, given the rapid changes in the global economy, right, the graduates must continue to learn, right? So that they can remain productive throughout their lifespan. Okay, so such a need arises, and sometimes we call it continuous professional development. Okay, so which means you still continue to learn, right, even though after you have obtained your degree. Okay, so the need for such learning activities has actually spurred into something we call it massive open online courses, right? Sometimes we call it as MOOCs. Okay. So these online courses, actually, they offer high value and in-demand courses. And very often, they are offered in collaboration with Ivy League universities and global technology companies, right? So these, all the learners, actually, they can join these courses from anywhere globally, sometimes for free, sometimes with a very small fees, right, at a very low cost, okay? So this new way of learning, right, using the MOOCs is actually should not be only viewed as supplementary to the formal higher education. Because with proper guidance, right, it can become an alternative, right, to the traditional higher educations in the future. So which means that in the future, you may not need to go to the universities to attend the entire programs for 3 to 4 years, okay? And in addition, right, such online learning methods has attracted a growing number of adult learners, okay, who seek to have a new knowledge and skills to update their qualifications or to acquire new skills to start new careers. Okay, so in view of all this, right, such a needs, many higher learning educations in Malaysia is actually now offering, we call it micro-credentials courses. Okay, so micro-credential is actually a form of recognition, right? When you have acquired a specific skills or knowledge and we give you the recognition, okay? So such concept will allow, right, just-in-time learning, right, in bite-sized modules. A lot of time when I give advice to my, during this education fair, right, to the students who have interest into enrolling into university program, a lot of times I will tell them, this is how actually we've been running our programs, right? So we call it just in case for universities. So what do I mean by that for just in case? Which means in university program, we teach you a lot of things, but maybe it's about 20 to 30% can be applied in your jobs. Okay. But nowadays, because of the ease of access to information or to these online learning courses, we actually can do just-in-time learning, which means that you only learned when you need it. Okay, so that's just-in-time learning. Also, it can be in bite size, which means the courses can be in very modular form. And this will translate into in-demand learning. We call it in-demand learning and in a flexible manner, which means you only learn it when you need it and also at your own pace. Okay, so this is how our educational world, especially in the higher learning institution, is actually reacting to this Industrial 4.0. Okay, and this is actually my last slides. Right? I hope my pace is still okay, right? So before I wrap up everything, right, I would like to take this opportunity actually to clear up some of the fear, right, and give my view on the impact of this Industrial 4.0 to the world. So many people, they worry that singularity may happen, okay, and humans will be ruled over by AI and robots one day. Right, because this is not the first time I heard about this. I got my friends, my students, or even some of the people who visited my educational booth, they did ask these questions about the future of our future world, right? Is it going to be AI and robots? Is it going to be like Terminators? Actually, all this fear is mainly brought about by the recent advancement in deep learning, right? So such a technique has shown promising results in tasks that can be optimized using data and algorithms. However, we are still far, right, from reaching we call it the combination point of machine intelligence, right, which the researchers usually term them as the general artificial intelligence, where it can replace humans in all aspects of tasks. So this is what the question marks in Thomas' slides earlier on indicated, which is the hearts and soul, right, the hearts and the emotions, right. So we are still very far away from reaching that part. Okay, so we still have a long journey before we reach to that point. Okay, so I would say at this point in time and also in the very near future, humans are still far more superior, right, than machines in high-end creativity and interpersonal skills. Okay, so this is the things that we humans is actually very good at. And also to wrap up my sessions, I would say that Industrial 4.0 will definitely impact the productivity in a positive manner. Okay, so it is actually been confirmed by all the speakers earlier on. Okay, and it will bring, of course, economic growth to the world. At the same time, the revolution will actually re-architect the workforce, right, which is gearing towards the digital directions, and also in a very disruptive manner. So whether such transformation will impact us positively or it will impact us in a negative way has yet to be seen. Okay, because we just have embarking on the journeys to that. So we have not seen the end point, okay, how it's going to affect us. But the outcomes will mostly depend on how we react to such changes. Nevertheless, Industrial 4.0 has brought certain level of resentment with which governments, organizations and higher learning institutions will need to address, right? So it has brought in some resentment, right, where the people has feel it. So the governments, the companies, the organizations and the universities or the higher learning institutions, they will need to look into it. They will need to address, they will need to come up with a roadmap on how the workforce can be upskills or reskills to ensure relevancy and competitiveness in the future, right? So I think I have reached the end of my talk, and thank you very much for all to listen in.
Thank you.
And I look forward to the panel discussion. All right, thank you.
We should all spend a little bit more time with you.